Hi, I'm Varun Deshpande, Managing Director at the Good Food Institute India. Thank you for joining us at the Smart Protein Summit. As you know, we lay the groundwork of the smart protein sector in the country across business, science, and policy. These smart protein foods, whether they're made from plants, cultivated from cells, or produced from microorganisms like fungi, are demonstrating a model to save the planet because people have been saying that animal agriculture, industrial animal agriculture, is causing huge damage to our global commons, our public health, our climate, and our ecology over the last decades. But the clarion cries of eat chickpeas, not chicken, or eat broccoli, not beef, simply don't seem to work. Before I begin, I want to say a huge thanks and congratulations to the entire GFI India team for putting this all together. And I mean the summit as well as everything in the sector, really. And to our sponsors and partners for the summit. Title sponsors Loris Bio, IFF, ADM, and AAK, and key sponsors Bueller, Cornell, Griffith Foods, Sun NutraFoods, Semega, Reliance Industries Limited, and VKL, as well as our network partners, the Indian Pulses and Grains Association, Protein Foods and Nutrition Development Association of India, the Association of Biotechnology-Led Enterprises, and the Government of India's Biotechnology Industry Research Assistance Council, all excellent partners in our efforts to build this sunrise industry. So at the outset, let me just pause and say that it is almost surreal to have so many partners supporting a summit like this. I'm sure many of you who've worked with us for several years will agree with me that it is surreal. The summit is our opportunity to bring together this network and our community, so thousands of you across business, science, and policy, and to urge continued bold visionary action towards a more secure, sustainable, and just food system. It's also our opportunity to celebrate how far we've come and where we are today. And where we are today is an incredibly exciting time in the Indian landscape. Dozens of fantastic entrepreneurs we've worked with for years are formulating and launching plant-based foods in the Indian market. And of course, dozens will become hundreds soon enough. Many more are working on deep tech innovations in fermentation-derived and cultivated proteins. Many academic and government partnerships are coming to fruition, and large corporations are beginning to enter the fray meaningfully. Last year, we used the summit as an opportunity to collectively lay out the need for a mission for smart protein. And this year, especially as we aim to build back stronger from the pandemic, we are moving further from conversation to action. So over the next 3 days, we have a fantastic agenda laying out the state of the industry, building a roadmap for where we go from here, and identifying linkages with public and planetary health. I don't want to spoil too much, but you'll hear from trailblazing entrepreneurs, captains of industry, including 4 fantastic keynote speakers, leading scientists and academic leaders, and policymakers from around the world. We'll have panels educating key audiences and closed-door roundtables moving forward the industry. And we know it's going to be yet another marker in how we can build out this mission for smart protein in India. Now, we've always viewed our work at GFI India as an opportunity to demonstrate a model for the establishment of smart protein in the developing world. We have huge promise to drive the space forward and in turn benefit from that progress globally. And that's a great thing because we cannot continue with business as usual. Scarcity and strife in so many forms are an imminent and already ever-present threat, whether it's malnutrition, food insecurity, climate change, economic fragility, and of course, public health issues like pandemics. Emerging markets like India are home to some of the largest groups of vulnerable populations on the planet. We have some of the highest rates of these challenges anywhere in the world. And at the same time, we also have the highest numbers of things like diabetes and metabolic diseases. So this multifold burden of malnutrition is nothing short of tragic. It robs so many people of the ability to shape their own destiny. Ushering in an affordable, sustainable supply of delicious, nutritious protein foods is critical to reversing that tragedy. Whichever way you look at it, the why of smart protein in India is as strong as anywhere in the world. This is a particularly opportune time to talk about these issues. We just had the first UN Food System Summit in September, and last week we had the Global Conference of Parties, the world's largest climate conference. Especially as we build back from the pandemic, there's a huge focus on making sure that developing world voices and communities are included in the food system's vision for the future, and that's great. I love the emerging discourse. I'm here for it, but I'm also here to tell you that if smart protein, and especially smart protein in emerging markets in India, do not have a seat at the table, it's not going to be enough. The good news is that so many are working tirelessly towards a more nourishing food system, And this is our opportunity to accelerate that momentum. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the first session of the Smart Protein Summit and call it open. I will hand over to Mr. Suresh Narayan, well, to myself interviewing Mr. Suresh Narayanan, the chairman and MD of Nestle. All right, so we're going to launch into a very exciting day one of the Smart Protein Summit here. And as you know, we're focusing on the state of the industry here in India. But of course, the sector, the smart protein sector, is soaring globally with huge investments from private investors, from large-scale investment banks, etc., but critically as well from the corporate landscape, which is responsible for a huge portion of the way the world eats, or influences a huge portion of the way the world eats. And when we're talking about the corporate landscape, you can't get any bigger than Nestle, which is quite literally the largest food corporation in the world. That's why we're delighted to have with us as our first keynote speaker at the Smart Protein Summit, Mr. Suresh Narayanan. Suresh has 40 years of experience in the corporate realm in India. I mean, you couldn't really get any more experience than that and have a deeper vantage point or a more advantaged vantage point into how the world eats. And we're delighted to have him with us here today. And without further ado, I'm just going to launch quickly into this. Suresh, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Varun. Thank you very much for inviting me to this platform on a very, very important topic.
Excellent. So, Suresh, Nestle globally has taken a visionary stance on this area, smart protein. You know, there have been investments, launches across plant-based burgers, dairy, shrimp, eggs, tuna, and major statements of intent from your counterparts in other markets. So, I wanted to ask you, given that the Indian context is very different, what excites you personally about this area?
I think, Varun, let's be very clear. I think one of the things that is very heartening to the conscience working for a food company is that you feed the world and you feed your people. And I believe that the whole area of smart proteins is really so vital and so crucial to our country, to all Indians, for really three very important reasons. And that's what really draws me to this subject. Number one is that every human being on this planet is expected to consume about 8 grams of protein per kilogram of weight every single day in order to have adequate building blocks of proteins for their lives. That translates to about 56 odd grams per male and about 46 odd grams per female. Unfortunately, in India, we have a deficiency ratio of anywhere between a fourth to more than a half in the consumption level of proteins, despite the fact that we are the world's largest grower of pulses. Almost a fourth of pulses in the world is grown in this country. We are the world's largest producer of milk, and we are also the second largest producer of fruits and vegetables. And yet, our protein imbalance is so high because we consume a lot of simple carbohydrates rather than more complex carbohydrates, proteins, fruits and vegetables and milk and those kind of things. So that's number one. Number two, the sheer scale of the poverty that we have in our country. 200 to 300 million people going without adequate nutrition. So we have on the one hand overnutrition, and we also have the problem of malnutrition, poverty and plenty in the context of India. And I think one of the best ways in which we can feed this country, even though on a cost basis, protein per calorie is more expensive, yet if you are able to find solutions, I think this can be a very, very good way to feed people in our country. And third, we've all just been through various episodes of climate change. It is a well-known fact that almost 83% of the cultivated land in the world is going behind meat and dairy-related produce, and almost 60% of our greenhouse gases is coming out of this sector. So it is an imperative for society, for the people, and also for their well-being that this subject becomes important. And that is why helming one of the largest consumer goods companies in the world, and in fact, as you rightly said, the largest food company, in India gives me that conscience to be able to pursue this field.
Well, I couldn't have asked for a better framing than that, Suresh. So I think, and you hit on a number of different emergencies that we are in. We need that 0.8 grams per kilogram of protein per kilogram of body weight. We're not hitting that. We need to address these issues of not just poverty or undernutrition, but also plenty or overnutrition, diseases of affluence, diabetes, etc., whatever you want to call them, right? And then, of course, climate as well as public health issues. So 100% agree with you there. However, where we are at right now in India is at the very beginning of such a transformation, right? Plant-based foods globally are growing very rapidly, but they're still taking their first steps in this country. So the initial market for these foods is an early adopter group, which already cares about the issues of planetary health or reducing their meat or animal foods consumption. Now, from your perspective as the leader of Nestle in the country, what will it take to go to the true mass market where everything depends on taste, price, aspiration? Because we can't afford to sit around and wait till 2030 and address consumption then.
I think it's a very good question, Varun. And for me, I think the first mindset change that we have to make is that smart proteins is not only to assuage the moral conscience of people on global warming. It is much more than that. It is a necessity in order to feed the planet, and with the increasing demand of meat and meat-based products, and with the consequent impact that it has on economies, this is an imperative that we need to look at on a more urgent, on a more serious basis. So that's one. So let's get the emotive issue out of the way. There is an economic imperative why we must look at smart proteins and must look at alternate proteins. Now, I believe that in the context of India, there are probably 4 or 5 things that are extremely important for us as a country. I call it the 5 T's. The first T is triangulation. I think the whole area of alternate proteins merits a close cooperation between research establishments in this country who understand the protein consumption, the taste, textures, and the economics of it. Private industry, because the drivers of the whole concept of alternate proteins will have to be to a large extent private industry, young startups, and entrepreneurs, and of course the government, because I believe that it is very important for the government and the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Processing and others to be deeply involved in this, because this is where the difference will come. So the first T is triangulation. Second, technologies. Today, we have 3 different kinds of proteins, as you know, in the alternate protein form. One is plant-based protein. Secondly is fermented technology-based protein. And the third is cell culture and cell culture-based created proteins. Now, the third part, the cell culture created one, is probably a bit distant in this country. But the first 2, both fermented technology related protein masses and also plant-based proteins, is something that can be worked upon in terms of technology. This technology obviously has to be engineered and nurtured over a period of time. But it is important here to look at both the cost, the complexity, and the efficacy of what we will be using. So the technology component here is high. And let's remember that being the world's largest producer of pulses and also of milk, if you look at it, if you look at the map of India and you look at the top 5 states for the production of pulses, and you look at the top 5 states for the production of milk, these are almost coterminous. States like Uttar Pradesh, like Rajasthan, like Madhya Pradesh, like Andhra Pradesh, right? Maharashtra, Punjab, these are appearing in the top list. So why don't we create the concept of what I call protein clusters? Protein clusters are really between the farmers, between the government, between the research establishments, and between the private sector players to create that ecosystem of protein clusters so that food processing industries can come around these protein clusters to look at technologies that are developed by our own indigenous help and support of the R&D institutions, to create plant-based protein products in the first stage. So let's be clear. The question for me is not to create an alternate burger. The question for me is to create a product that is palatable to a Varun and palatable to a Suresh as Indians. And they say, wow, this tastes good. And incidentally, it also gives me the kind of protein component that I need in my nutrition. So I think technology is the second one. The third one is, of course, transferability. I think one of the challenges in the country is that there are research establishments, like for example the CFTRI or like for example NIFTEM. These are very, very reputed, top-notch institutions in the whole area of technologies. But can we quicken their transfer of technologies to private enterprise and to young startups in order to be able to develop the products that we are talking about? That's the third issue of transferability. Fourth one is, of course, transparency. I think the intention has to be clear. The intention in alternate proteins is not to run farmers to the ground or not to eliminate dairy and dairy technology completely. There is no question. This is a country of farmers, and we have to understand that dairy technologies and existing technologies will continue to play a role. The question is not one of elimination. So I think if the minute we take it as contra points of view and get into a conflict situation, then transparency goes. The question is, we have to feed 1.3 billion with adequate amount of proteins, where today 90% of them are not even aware that they need these proteins, and 80% of them actually don't have these proteins. So I think this transparency of a synergistic journey between existing practices in farm and dairy technologies and alternate technologies of proteins needs to be put in. And the fifth T for me is the tenacity. I mean, the fact is that we are not going to be cracking this whole code in the next 2 to 3 years. It is an evolving cycle of technology, of transferability, of new kind of products, and as you rightly said, of developing economies of scale and making proteins genuinely cheap in order that consumers say, we are happy to have them because they are good for us and also they don't pinch my wallet.
Yeah, fantastic, Suresh. I think that's something of a clarion call for us all to come together in service of this and think of it as a means of supplementing what already exists, complementing it rather. We're seeing this globally, right? People who are in the dairy industry are getting involved in plant-based foods, and vice versa. There's a lot of opportunity, I think.
I think the important issue, Varun, for us is to understand that as the world's biggest dairy producer, milk producer.
Yeah.
Any strategy that is going to say eliminate milk and substitute with a plant-based protein is not going to be a viable strategy. I don't even think it is a socially ethical strategy. What do you expect? So if you are able to develop technologies, like for example, Nestle is working today with the dairy farmers in order to help them to reduce the greenhouse gases. Now, the way to mitigate it, the way to help them to have better farming practices, better feed practices, better breed practices, better energy management practices, these are better ways of mitigating the crisis that is upon us rather than elimination. And I think if we look at a synergistic partnership between plant-based proteins, the industry and the journey, and the existing protein sources that we have in this country, of which dairy and pulses are an important component, I believe that there will be a way forward which will be good for both, good for the country and also good for the consumer.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, makes sense. This is all a rallying cry for us all to come together in service of this vision. I guess I would ask, though, a major piece of what we're talking about is looking to the future, right? So we're seeing huge growth in demand for meat in particular over the next decade, which would place burdens on our resources. You highlighted that at the beginning of the conversation, and public health infrastructure, water use, potential zoonotic diseases, etc. So at a mega food company like Nestle in India, you have these core categories. You have coffee, milk, etc. Globally, you've gone ahead and evaluated categories like cultivated meat made from animal cells that you mentioned earlier, because they offer this kind of moonshot promise, right?
Yes.
So how would you say you balance, in your position as a leader, you do have certain pressure. So how do you balance this kind of diversification, future proofing with the here and now, particularly?
Look, I think it's a very good question, Varun. And for me, two things are very important. Number one is the products that we create. Firstly, the whole area of alternate proteins and plant-based proteins is a very serious mission for my organization. For Nestle, it is a very serious mission. We have globally about 12 what we call R&D accelerators, which are basically centers that look at development of plant-based protein technologies, which can be efficaciously rolled out in terms of relevant products and robust products all across the globe. So there are 12 of these R&D accelerators that we have in Nestle. One of them is actually based in India, in Manesar, where we have our R&D facility. So it is a global center of expertise, and it is a center that also provides India the relevant technologies for this. So that's number one, that it is serious business. Secondly, as a company, I mean, if you look at one of our largest brands, Maggi noodles, Maggi is entirely plant-based. I mean, the fact of the matter is that it is a derivative from wheat, from spices, and from other ingredients that goes to make this genuinely a proposition that can be linked directly to the farm, to the sourcing from farms, and through technologies that can develop this into cost-effective platforms of nutrition delivery. So the way we look at it is that the kind of journey that we would have as a company is to strengthen our existing portfolio in the foods business as far as plant-based proteins are concerned. Number two, we have a dairy business which also is taking a hard look at how we can not only reduce the GHG emissions as far as our farms are concerned, and we're dealing with almost 100,000 farmers across the country, but also look at how we can use plant derivatives, like we have done, as you rightly alluded to. We have Wunda, for example, which is a peanut, which is a pea-based drink that has been launched in Europe, or indeed the coffee creamers or ice creams or ready meals that have also been launched across some parts of the Nestle world. So I think this is going to be an important initiative for us. But we will look at customizing products to Indian tastes. So to me, creating a burger that has got a almost meat-like taste and texture is an opportunity, but a larger opportunity is for me to create protein-based products that can be fitted into the Indian repertoire of cuisines, and in fact is familiar for them in terms of taste, culture, and texture, because food is very local. I can't create products from Europe and get them to India and expect the Indian consumer to say, wow, these are great products. I need my tikkis, I need my bhujiyas, I need my stuff, which is all customized to the Indian palate. So that is a big part of what we're doing. The third part, Varun, which is very exciting for the company. Today, for example, if you look at our spice business, and we've got with Maggi and noodles and with Masala-ae-Magic, a fairly large spice component. We work with about 1,500 spice farmers in about 8 states, working with them on sustainable farming, sustainable quality and produce, and sustainable incomes. And usage of water, conservation of water is also one of the key aspects of this program. Just imagine if I'm able to roll up more of these kind of initiatives, like the Maggi plan that I have on spices, with other areas in pulses and in wheat and in various other ingredients that we deal with. It can create a very large ecosystem of sustainable farming, which is really one of the most important objectives that we have in the agricultural sector of our country, to be able to sustain farms, sustain incomes, sustain growth over a period of time. So some of the distress that we see today in the farming sector can be quite clearly mitigated as a result of some of this. So I see multiple opportunities, and we have a team in my company that is working. In fact, I believe some of my colleagues are in active conversation with you and your team to look at how we can strengthen this partnership. The more hands there are, the more eyes there are, the more heads there are. This area can definitely be cracked, not just as a source of nutrition, but as a source of well-being for farmers and agriculture, and most importantly, for helping to thrive entrepreneurship, employment generation, and backward linkages in the country.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, and we are indeed working with your team, Suresh, on multiple things. So we've worked with your India team and your colleagues in Switzerland, other places, to talk about this very opportunity, the one that you highlight, one of them that you highlighted there on agri linkages. We've got this agricultural biodiversity. You've repeatedly highlighted it, right? So pulses, millets. And we have entrepreneurs making things with hemp, pongamia, Ayurvedic plants. It's really fascinating. Could we stay on that topic a little bit further and dive a little deeper into that? What do you see as the hurdles for us to integrate backwards into agri supply? Because we're seeing other countries do this. Canada, Denmark, they really want to be countries that are the farmers for the world. And we don't want to lose that opportunity in India, both for domestic and the international market.
I think there are probably two incongruences in the context of India that is affecting the development of this whole industry. Number one is the link between the farmer or the farming unit, the farmer producer organizations, and the private enterprise in terms of the sustainability, the quality, the transparency, and the economic viability of the produce, whether it is millet or whether it is pulses or whether it is any of the other protein sources that we're talking about. I think there is a greater need for linkages established at the sourcing level, which is able to ensure that suppliers and users of agri ingredients treat the farmers and the farmer organizations fairly, and vice versa. So there is a congruence in that relationship. Secondly, I think there is a need for sheer accelerating the number of startups in the whole alternate protein space. The fact is, we are having a lot of burst happening in fintech, in technology, payment systems, in those kind of areas, and you see examples, Varun, of youngsters doing extremely well. Food is slow burn. You see, one of the challenges in food is that it took almost 10-15 years for India to accept Maggi noodles as one of the options it would have in snacking. We are easier with the shampoos we use, we are easier with the toothpaste we use, we are easier with the soaps we use. We are much tougher with what we eat, because we have to ensure that when it goes down the gullet, it is not just safe, but also before that, when it hits my tongue, that it is tasty, and more importantly, that it doesn't eat too much into my wallet. So therefore, this means that there has to be a lot of incubation between private players, large private players, and these young entrepreneurs. I'm delighted that at Nestle, in our R&D center in Manesar, we actually have incubated a few young startups working on this space and on a few other spaces in order to give them the relevant exposure, technologies, and the kind of window to be able to access the relevant people who will develop these businesses. So I think the second interface between the producers or between the entrepreneurs and the markets need the incubation to be done over an extended period of time. Food habits will take 5, 10 years, 15 years to develop. You will not start seeing returns happening in year 2 and year 3. That is the hard reality of the food business. And believe me, Varun, as somebody who's spent 4 decades in this business, I can tell you that in as much as you have the pleasure of seeing a large brand, you also have the pain of seeing it through its birth and its growth process for a long, long time. So if these two issues, I believe, are incongruences between the farmer and the user, and between the entrepreneur and the consumer. If these two sectors are taken care of in terms of incubation and in terms of more transparent and more sustainable relationships, I think we can move the dial quite well. And wherever we have done this, Varun, we seem to be succeeding quite well.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And we've always said to any of our partners and stakeholders, please, let's talk in 3-year increments. And even so, you might see the needle move on a 5-year scale, 10-year scale, rather than a 3-year scale. But thank you for sharing that. I have a final question for you that's related to nutrition. You personally and Nestle India have been leaders in nutrition. In getting essential nutrients out to people, you have a large infant nutrition portfolio. You, of course, have a huge portfolio of snacks and beverages, etc. What would you say is the interplay? You highlighted it right at the beginning of this conversation, but what would you say is the interplay here between Smart Protein and large food categories or snacks, etc., and how can we get there faster?
I think it's a very important question, Varun. And today, honestly, the impediment is really acceptability and scale. If you are able to create plant-based protein products for consumers, which are not only nutritionally efficacious, but also are at optimal costs, there is a large market for it. I don't think there is any lack of acceptance. If I am able to get an excellent dal-based, for example, product or ready-to-eat meal or a snack, the consumer is not running away from it because he or she is aware of what a tuar dal is and what an urad dal is and what a chana dal is. So they are not unfamiliar with that. The question is, can I use technologies to be able to create a product that is also lighter on the wallet? And I think this is where the transformation of India will happen in alternate proteins, when it becomes mainstream, affordable, and no longer a curiosity or a conscience assuager that I use once in a while. Today we have number of young people of your generation who are conscious about the planet, who are conscious about fairness, who are conscious about the fact that we need to uplift number of people from below the poverty line to sustainable incomes. You can use these products on an infrequent basis. But the day I'm able to put across 10, 15, 20, 100 products that makes it efficacious for you, economical for you, nutritious for you, and incidentally familiar to you, then the deed is made. Then you are no longer caught up in this trap saying that, look, is this something that I need to use a few times because I need to do my good deed for the planet? The question is not doing good deed for the planet. The question is doing a good deed to yourself. And that is where plant-based alternate proteins can be a huge source of help and support for mankind.
Yeah, if we want to transcend the early adopter market and go to the true mass market and make a world where alternative proteins are a mainstream choice, not the alternative, we have a huge amount of work to do. But thank you so much, Suresh, for joining us here today at the Smart Protein Summit. Inspiring words as always. We look forward to working with you and your team to make a lot of this a reality.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Varun. Thank you very much. And God bless you all on this very, very important journey. I think feeding the planet and more importantly for you and me, feeding Indians, both today and in the future, nutritious products, efficacious products, and products that do good for them should be a national mission and should be a personal mission for all of us, and not just a curiosity or not just a fashion statement that we make to ourselves and to the community. Good luck to all of you at GFI, and also good luck for the workshop, and also for all the thought leaders who will be participating.